For so long now, Australians have put up with the destruction of a once healthy housing market. Over the last 3 decades, house prices have risen way faster than wages, making it increasingly difficult for each new generation to afford their own home. In fact, house prices are now so ridiculously expensive that millions of Australians are forever locked out of the housing market.
I'm locked out.
But what's even worse, renting in Australia is like the Hunger Games, with more and more people becoming homeless every day. However, there's now some signs that Australians are starting to rise up and speak out against this broken and unfair housing market. But will it make a difference? I'm Biko Konstantinos. Why did the toilet paper start rolling down the hill? To get to the bottom. Why didn't the toilet paper make it all the way down? Because it got stuck in a crack. And you could get stuck if you don't like this video. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'll bring the toilet humor and inform you about the housing market at the same time. Actually, the housing market is a bit like a toilet, or perhaps more like the stuff that goes in the bloody toilet. So are Australians finally starting to rise up? Let's take a look. First, Jordan Vandenberg, aka Purple Pingers, set up a website called shitrentals.com, and guess what it focuses on? Shit bloody rentals. It provides an avenue where people can share their terrible experiences with rentals, creating sort of a name and shame database so renters can take back a bit of control and share their shocking experiences with the world. Now, if you go to the site shitrentals.org, you can review a shit property or you can review a shit agency. So of course, real estate agents absolutely hate this site, but also dodgy landlords doing the wrong thing are suddenly being named and shamed. The website has seen massive engagement with more and more reviews getting entered every day. So here was a simple idea that's giving some power back to renters. Then we saw the demonized landlord on Q&A, and boy did the internet blow up.
I'm just so angry that as a landlord, I shouldn't have to feel guilty about owning property or properties in our case. Why does it appear that all landlords are demonised and put in the same bracket?
First of all, no landlord who owned a property prior to COVID has any reason to complain whatsoever. Reckless COVID stimulus combined with zero interest rates created massive speculative demand for houses, sending property prices through the roof. Now, the RBA kept rates at zero for far too long, which saw demand for housing snowball. And when they finally got the picture and started raising interest rates sharply, this should have seen house prices start to decline and should have removed some of that speculation from the market. But guess what the government did? Record mass migration. So just when house prices should have started falling, they started surging again. More speculation, more ridiculous demand, lowest rental vacancy rates in history. So not only were property investors just handed this unbelievable capital gain, they're also now enjoying surging rents because the government lost all control of their immigration levels. So you do not complain if you win first division in the lotto. But secondly, it's not landlords' fault. They're just taking advantage of the housing policies that have turned Australian property into a sure bet. If you knew that a horse was going to win a race, wouldn't you bet everything on it? And that every other time that horse raced, you'd come back again and bet on it. And the reason you're happy to invest everything onto that horse, because you know the people in charge of the race will never let that horse lose. That, my friends, is the Australian housing market.
Well, with Australia in the grips of a housing crisis, one determined housing advocate / TikTok star has made it his mission to help put a roof over people's heads.
Jordan's back, trying to put a roof over people's heads. But isn't that the government's job?
This is housing advocate Purple Pingers, aka Jordan Vandenberg. And he's got a message for the owners of some of Australia's roughly 136,000 empty homes.
Homes are for people to live in, not for rich people to make money off.
Jordan, of course they're for rich people to make money off. We allow ultra-rich foreigners to buy up our property, leave it empty, and cash in.
Late last week, Mr. Pingers let the internet know he was collecting the addresses of vacant properties through his website, encouraging anyone who needed a house to go for it.
Fun fact. Squatting in Australia is not necessarily illegal, especially if the front door doesn't actually lock. It's a free house if you want it.
Better than having to live in a tent in a park or in your car.
But when news of his exploits hit the States, this is how they took it.
Yeah, I wouldn't try that crap in Texas.
Arrest this criminal!
You will get a lot of people killed. We have the right to remove squatters.
Did you know that the US rental vacancy rate is at 6.6%, whereas Australia's sitting around 1%? I don't think people really understand just how bad Australia has destroyed its housing market. Maybe it is time to start rising up.
Do you really think that encouraging people to squat on private property is the way to fix it?
Yeah, look, let me answer your question by asking you another question. Do you think it's right that we have thousands of vacant, abandoned homes while we have people living on the street?
Trouble is, politicians and property owners have no clue what it is to live in insecure accommodation, where you don't have the safety or the dignity that you get from having a place of your own. They don't seem to give a rat's ass. As long as house prices are rising, they're happy.
No, I don't. But is this the right way to handle it, though? I mean, shouldn't we focus it on policy?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room to focus on policy, but what do we do in the meantime when people are on the street while we're focusing on policy?
This crisis has been going on for more than 2 years now, and the government's implemented this much policy that's made any positive improvement. The policy that's impacted the housing market the most is their mass migration policy, which has made the crisis 10 times bloody worse.
This is a pretty big ethical question that we need to ask ourselves. We've got, the government promising a couple houses in a decade or two from now, while we have people living on the street and empty homes.
Dead right. And we also need to ask, why are we allowing foreigners to buy Australian houses when millions of Australians can no longer afford their own home? Why aren't we significantly reducing immigration levels to ease the housing shortage and allow struggling Australians to have a place to live? Why do we continue paying billions of dollars in tax concessions to property investors? I mean, they've already won the lotto, but we want to ensure that they can always outbid someone just trying to buy their first home. And why do we allow politicians who own much more property than the average Australian set housing policies that directly impacts the price of property? I mean, we don't let sports players bet on their own game, but we let politicians bet on property, knowing they have full control of the policies that can keep house prices ultra high. I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like a bloody conflict of interest.
What would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see like a national vacant residential land tax that is quite prohibitive to either encourage people to rent out your house or sell it or do something with it. Just don't let it sit there while we have a housing crisis. It's pretty simple.
It is pretty simple. When you have a crisis, you put in some changes to try and fix the crisis. Here's a guy using the collective power of people to start making a difference, and people are getting involved in a massive way. Do you remember in 2021 where thousands of people got together on forums to purchase the same stock on the stock market and send its price soaring? Can you imagine if millions of Australians started rising up and demanded that action was taken to start fixing the housing crisis? And if action wasn't taken, they'd take things into their own hands. I heard a story of all the tenants in an apartment building refusing to pay rent. Now, I'm not saying to do that, but if this crisis continues being ignored, Australians will rise up and demand change, because it's completely unacceptable when hardworking citizens can no longer afford their own home. I'm Biko Konstantinos.